History is made in Ethiopia as the parliament approves the country's first female president. Islamic banking grows in Africa amid a booming Muslim population. And combating malaria in Uganda with soap. We'll have a report. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent McCory. This is Africa 54. In a landmark development, the Ethiopian parliament has approved senior diplomat Sahle-Work Zewde as the country's first female president on Thursday. This cements another shift in the country's political system from Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. Sahle-Work is currently UN Under Secretary General and Special Representative of the Secretary General to the African Union. The president's post is a ceremonial one in Ethiopia. The prime minister, who is the head of state, holds executive power. In another significant move, the prime minister last week appointed 10 female ministers, making Ethiopia the third country in Africa after Rwanda and Seychelles to achieve gender parity in their cabinets. Sahle-Work becomes the fourth president since the ruling Ethiopian People's Revolutionary Democratic Front coalition came to power. She replaces Mulatu Teshome Wirtu, who tendered his resignation to Parliament earlier on Wednesday. Well, now for more on the significance of the appointment of a female president in Ethiopia, I'm joined by VOA's Salem Solomon. Welcome, Salem.
Thanks for having me.
We did mention that this is largely a ceremonial position, but why is it a big deal? Why is it that significant?
It's a big deal because, you know, Ethiopia is on a track of some sort of reform, and we saw half of the cabinet of the Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed with women occupying 20 people, but 10 of them women. And also, you know, we're looking at, even if it's a ceremonial position, presidents in Ethiopia usually are with the approval of the Prime Minister. They appoint ambassadors, they receive delegations. It's more a ceremonial for that reason, but it's also symbolic because it signifies in a country like a patriarchy like Ethiopia that women play a big role in higher places. So it shows that it has symbolic.
Yeah, indeed. After this appointment, the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff Fitsum Areke tweeted as follows. He said, in a patriarchal society such as ours, the appointment of a female head of state not only sets the standard for the future, but also normalizes women as decision makers in public life. So in a way, this be seen as a positive influence, not only in terms of parity within a cabinet, but also other sectors, whether private or government, within Ethiopia.
That's true. And also, like, you know, if you look at the parliament of Ethiopia, 37% are now women, which is way more than the portion of women in U.S. Congress here in the U.S. And so it's very prominent, and it's a big deal because of this. But let's not think and forget that Ethiopia also suffers a lot of gender-based issues, as you said, patriarchy, or as the spokesperson said, patriarchy. So if you look at the serious issues that Ethiopia has, they have child marriage issues where young girls are married off at a young age. They have a high level of female genital mutilation. They have gender-based issues that still needs to be addressed. And having these women in high places to make decisions, I think hopefully maybe we'll have yet to see make a dent in this progress. And surveys show that when women are participating in higher levels, progress is eminent.
And one hopes that is going to be the case, because we have had some negative reports from countries like Uganda, where they say that despite having you know, 50% in parliament and perhaps even in cabinet a large number of women, still the conditions of women at the local level, at the grassroots level, remains about the same, because there's a question of the system. The system is still patriarchal, and also sometimes women have been accused that sometimes even when they got into these positions, they did not necessarily fight to change the state of women at the grassroots level.
So they become the functionaries of an existing system. So this is a very good question to ask about, like, you know, is this a token position that is given to these women? But look at the background of at least even the cabinet members that Abiy Ahmed has picked. Most of them are PhD holders. They have a proven track record of government positions. Some of them come from ministerial positions. So these are government position holding, even some of them engineers, tested, proven track record. So we have to see. I mean, this is just a new reform that we're seeing. We have to see what this means for the average person, young girl and woman in Ethiopia. But these women that are being picked, it seems like it's with substance.
Let's talk a little bit about President Sahle-Work. She is not just some woman. I mean, any woman is a woman of substance, but there's something a little more about her.
Yes.
What can you tell us?
Well, Sahle-Work is a fluent French speaker. She went to Lycée. It's a French, French government-funded school in Ethiopia. She studied in France, and in fact, one of her first positions was to be an ambassador in Djibouti. And she hesitated because it's a Muslim-dominated country. She wasn't sure how she was going to perform as a woman, but she went for it. And since then, she's represented Francophone African countries, Mali, Senegal, West Africa, and beyond. And just recently, she was appointed by the UN to be a newly created position in Nairobi, to be a representative, an ambassador in Nairobi. And so she is a career diplomat. And I think at some point, she's also about peace and reconciliation. At some point, they asked her what she's passionate about, and she said, public service.
Yeah, and sometimes it's said that a good leader surrounds themselves with good people who can offer useful advice, and some of this perhaps could come from the president in the case of the advice that the Prime Minister Abiy needs.
We'll have to peel our eyes and see, hold them accountable as we go.
Definitely, we look forward. Thank you very much
for having me.
Joining us today. Well, Salem Solomon of The Voice of America. Now, investigative reporters are generating shockwaves around the world for their reporting. Media houses, independent journalists and production houses are investing more money into in-depth reporting. But at what cost? Africa 54's Paul Ndiho has more.
It requires skill, extensive research using both secret and open source documents, audios, videos, and people to connect the dots. But at the same time, investigative journalism can be very risky. Reporters often put their lives on the line to secure these stories. An investigative documentary, The Profiteers, done by Kenyan-based journalist John Allan Namu and produced by Africa Uncensored, reportedly exposed Kenyan banks, government and military officials in a South Sudanese money laundering scheme. Earlier this month, protesters marched in Nairobi to demand that Kenyan authorities freeze assets of alleged corrupt South Sudanese leaders. The Profiteers, a three-part investigative documentary, alleges top South Sudanese officials laundered stolen funds through Kenyan banks, bought property in Nairobi and Kampala, and are being protected by security agencies. John Allan Namu is the investigation's lead reporter.
There are certain members of the business and political elite who are taking advantage of the conflict or aligning themselves to politicians who are stealing, literally stealing from South Sudan and having that money invested here.
A power-sharing deal agreed to in August by President Salva Kiir and rebel leader Riek Machar has raised hopes for an end to the conflict. But corruption remains rampant and activists fear the peace deal, if it holds, would insulate South Sudanese leaders from corruption charges. Earlier this year, the Voice of America launched an investigation into the finances and premises made about one of Kenya's most significant public works project ever, the Standard Gauge Railway (SGR). The investigation, dubbed Madaraka Express after the train, found resentment over land payments, disregard for the views of conservationists, and concern that Kenya may be unable to pay back the billions in debt owed to the Chinese. The investigation also revealed that Chinese state banks loaned Kenya the money for the train. Then the Chinese companies cashed in on construction contracts. There are also complaints that the Chinese kept the best-paying jobs for themselves and mistreated Kenyans in low-skilled positions. VOA also found out that the Chinese used cheap materials to build concrete and wire fencing to keep animals off the train tracks. The fences are falling. Now all the original fencing is being replaced. The Kenyan government promised jobs for local and compensation for landowners along the route of its new train. But some Kenyans are still waiting for work and money for their land. In the West African nation of Liberia, another lengthy investigative report jointly produced by Time magazine and ProPublica Unprotected focused on the U.S. charity More Than Me that was supposed to rescue and educate orphaned Liberian girls. Instead, one of its co-founders allegedly repeatedly raped and abused multiple girls he was supposed to protect. Macintosh Johnson eventually was charged with assaulting girls as young as 11 years old. His trial ended in a hung jury and he died of AIDS in early 2016. But the investigation exposes how childcare leaders failed to prevent Johnson from exploiting the girls despite repeated red flags. Paul Ndiho, VOA News, Washington.
Islamic-style banking is on the rise worldwide, recently showing especially strong growth in Africa. That's according to the rating agency Moody's. Now, this type of banking system doesn't charge or pay interest, uses physical assets to underpin transactions, and does not invest in so-called sin industries like alcohol, pork, and gambling. In South Africa, the continent's financial hub, Islamic banking is gaining popularity among the minority Muslim community, which is predominantly South Asian. VOA's Anita Powell reports from Johannesburg.
When Farham Motier took over the family business, he decided to do something different. He persuaded his father, who has run this bridal shop in Johannesburg's oldest Indian mall for 4 decades, to migrate away from traditional banks and into newly available Islamic banking systems. It's been a smooth process, he says. He didn't even switch banks, as the nation's biggest full-service banks all offer Islamic banking.
Just by changing a few things in the way Islamic banking versus conventional banking, it makes a difference. The idea is basically, so from conventional banking, it's basically the way they lend money versus Islamic banking where they invest the money and you earn your return. One's profit share and the other's interest.
So once it opens on the head of Islamic banking at South Africa's First National Bank says business is booming. But banks, as privately held companies, don't disclose too many details.
We're seeing a steady growth, and this is not just from FNB's perspective, but I believe from the other banks who play in the sector as well.
He also says Islamic banking has wider benefits, noting the successful issue in 2014 of a $500 million Islamic-compliant bond called a Sukuk in South Africa.
And I think we're beginning to see the emergence of this coming through in East Africa, because for the first time we're hearing of governments like the Tanzanian government talking about Sukuk issuance, the Kenyan government talking about Sukuk issuance. We've heard of Nigeria doing Sukuk. And, you know, I think as the prominence of Sukuk and the success starts becoming more apparent, we're probably going to see more African countries using this as a mechanism to develop infrastructure within their own countries.
But not everyone is a believer. Salesman Imtiaz Khan says he believes Islamic banking's distinction between interest and profit is purely semantic, because they're still working with interest.
No, I do not use Islamic banking. I feel that Islamic banking, the root starts from the normal banks, and it has interest from the root, beginning from the root. There's no such thing as non-interest. Islamic banking.
But Motier says he's working to convince his fellow businessmen to make the switch.
I, as a Muslim person, believe there's more blessing in doing the right thing. So for me, that's exactly why I do think that Islamic banking is the future.
While some Muslim shopkeepers profess doubt, others say they're thinking about it. Because they say if they can maintain their faith and make money doing it, well, it just makes sense. Anita Powell, VOA News, Johannesburg.
Well, I want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. You're also streaming our show live on Facebook. So check us out and share our show with your friends. Find me on Twitter at VOA Vince McCory. Still ahead on Africa 54, the anti-mosquito soap that could help cleanse Uganda of malaria. But first, a look at Thursday's headlines.
For the first time in Ethiopia, a female is appointed as president in a unanimous vote by lawmakers. In Morocco, despite alleged rights violations waged by Moroccan authorities, hundreds of migrants keep returning to Tanger, hoping to find their way to Europe. In Somalia, local government and UN officials met to discuss solutions to challenges brought about by the country's high rates of urbanization. In South Africa, Finance Minister Tito Mboweni vows to tackle debt in his midterm budget speech in Parliament. Finally, in Libya, National Oil Corp, a state oil firm, holds its first business forum in more than 4 years in Benghazi in hopes the conference will mend rifts with the forces of Libyan strongman Khalifa Haftar.
President Donald Trump said on Wednesday that targeting current and former U.S. government officials with explosive devices is despicable and has no place in American politics. Suspicious packages were sent to former Secretary of State and Democratic presidential election candidate Hillary Clinton, former President Barack Obama, and several other prominent Americans, as well as the New York headquarters of the CNN News Network. Mike O'Sullivan reports that in remarks Wednesday night, Trump pointed to the media as part of the problem.
As police in Washington and suburban New York investigated suspicious packages sent to former President Obama and former Democratic presidential candidate Hillary Clinton, President Donald Trump, at a rally in Wisconsin, said political violence is an attack on democracy.
The media also has a responsibility to set a civil tone and to stop the endless hostility and constant negative and oftentimes false attacks and stories. Have to do it.
Earlier in the day, the New York office of the CNN News Network was evacuated after a suspicious package was found in its mailroom. Officials called it an act of terrorism.
Responding officers identified a device that appeared to be a live explosive device. NYPD bomb squad responded, secured the device, and removed it for investigation. Additionally, there was an envelope containing white powder.
Reports of suspicious packages included one at the Florida office of Democratic Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz, and followed a pipe bomb found Monday in the mailbox of Democratic Party donor billionaire George Soros. None of the devices exploded. Vice President Mike Pence condemned the acts as cowardly. In Florida, Hillary Clinton called this a troubling time.
And it's a time of deep divisions, and we have to do everything we can to bring our country together.
Critics have accused Trump of inflaming the rhetoric. A Republican senator doesn't agree, but urges moderation.
We think people ought to moderate their positions on both sides.
Investigations continue in Washington, New York, Florida, and Los Angeles, where authorities intercepted one of two suspicious packages to Congresswoman Maxine Waters. Mike O'Sullivan, VOA News, Los Angeles.
Well, in today's health news, an Ebola outbreak that ravaged Sierra Leone, Guinea, and Liberia in 2014 cost economies an estimated $53 billion. That's according to a study in this month's Journal of Infectious Diseases. The study aimed to combine the direct economic burden and the indirect social impact to generate a comprehensive cost of the outbreak, which was the worst in the world. Now, the outbreak ran from 2013 to 2016 and killed just over 11,000 people, more than all other non-Ebola outbreaks combined. The vast majority of cases were in Guinea, Liberia and Sierra Leone. The report put the economic cost at $14 billion and said the human cost was even greater, based on the people affected and a dollar figure that reflects the value of each human life. The new Ebola study factored in the impact on health workers, long-term conditions suffered by 17,000 Ebola survivors, and costs of treatment, infection control, screening, and deployment of personnel beyond West Africa. Well, the World Health Organization says Uganda has one of the world's highest malaria transmission rates. Well, one Ugandan woman has developed an innovative way to save thousands of lives in her home country. She's hoping to protect Ugandans from malaria with soap. Africa 54's Esther Gidui-Yuwat has the story.
Joan Nalubega grew up in an orphanage in Uganda. She often suffered from malaria and wondered if there was a better way to protect herself and those around her. That question motivated her to come up with a range of soaps to help fight the spread of the deadly disease. Her idea came to life when she joined SINA, Social Innovation Academy, a Mpigi-based organization that educates orphans, refugees, and other disadvantaged youth.
As I was a child, I used to face malaria a lot as a disease. So I grew up with this inspiration to come up with an intervention to prevent malaria. And so when I joined SINA, and through the mentorship and the coaching, I was like, I grew up with this motivation. Though it seems impossible, let me find a possibility for it to come to life.
Nalubega says she had noticed that most malaria repellent products, such as sprays, were targeted at tourists. There were no products affordable or accessible enough for local people who often needed them most. Nalubega consulted with mothers in her community and found the answer in a homemade soap.
That's where I wanted to go to these people who are not catered for. So I talked to different mothers, because mostly children below the age of 5 suffer from malaria. I talked to different mothers in Mpigi, in the rural community where I stay, and so I used to interact with them a lot, and I could ask them, which product you think can be accessible. We are looking for a product that they can access easily, a product that is easy to use, and a product that every household uses. That's why we made a soap, and we decided to put our repellent component in a soap, because you use soap, right? Every household uses soap.
Nalubega makes her soaps here at a workshop in Mpigi district. She mixes sodium hydroxide with either palm or olive oil and a variety of other oils. Her magic ingredients? The repellent component, which includes citronella and lavender.
We put olive oil, then we put coconut oil, then we put other oils, then at last we put the repellent component. So the citronella, the lavender, and all those other oils that we use for blending the repellent component.
She sells her soap bars at a high margin in resorts, lodges, and high-end hotels. That revenue allows her to subsidize her soaps for local communities. The World Health Organization says Uganda had 9.4 million confirmed malaria cases in 2017 and more than 5,000 deaths. Some say Nalubega's soap could not have come at a better time.
Before we started using this soap, the children suffered malaria. They had several bite marks on their bodies in the morning from mosquito bites, but now there are no mosquito bites. They don't have marks on their arms. I no longer struggle to buy medication. The soap has helped me, yet I don't know what ingredients were used. However, it's better than the previous one.
Last year, Nalubega received $5,000 from the Tony Elumelu Entrepreneurship Program to help get her business off the ground. This year, she's running for the Anzisha Prize, an award for young African entrepreneurs. Nalubega hopes to reduce the burden of malaria in her country by 20% over the next 5 years. She stays in regular contact with hospitals and communities to monitor the effects of her invention. One woman using her mind to change circumstances, making a difference and saving lives in her community and her country, one bar of soap at a time. Esther Githui-Ewart, VOA News, Washington.
Welcome back to Africa 54, and here's what's trending. The Ivorian TV drama Invisibles is the first original series produced in Africa by Vivendi's pay TV company Canal Plus. It's part of a drive to attract viewers on the continent in the face of growing Chinese competition and as subscribers at home cancel contract. Canal Plus has lost 1.3 million individual subscribers in mainland France since 2013 due to stiff competition and the rise of streaming services such as Netflix and Amazon. At the same time, Canal Plus has added twice as many subscribers in Africa, now its second largest market. Rights to European and African soccer have long been a draw in Africa, and Canal Plus has also invested heavily in locally produced content. Well, next up, a team of handy Australian men and women are turning trash back into treasures. The Repair Cafe is located in Canberra. In the war on waste, the soldiers are on the front lines. The teams are repairing everything from clothing to doorbells and bikes so they don't end up in the trash. And it's not just about reducing waste. It's also about gaining skills that were more common during the Great Depression and World War II, like clothing and textile repair. And that's what's trending today. Now, we told you last week about Nigeria's amputee football team trying to raise enough money to compete in the Amputee Football World Cup in Mexico. Some of those players are now on their way, hoping to field a full team for Sunday's opening round match against Brazil. Now, last-minute funding came from players on Nigeria's national team, the Super Eagles, from the Nigerian Football Federation, and from the campaign of Nigerian presidential candidate Atiku Abubakar. Amputee football is a seven-a-side game with the players using crutches on the pitch. Nigeria and Brazil are in a tough group that includes El Salvador and defending amputee world champions Russia. Russia, Poland and Turkey are favorites in this year's tournament. But Nigeria, Angola and Ghana are considered strong African contenders. The Amputee World Cup in Mexico kicks off Friday, October the 26th. Well, that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. For more news, tune in to VOA's evening radio show, Africa News Tonight at 1800 UTC. And in the mornings to Daybreak Africa between 0300 and 0600 UTC. That's Monday through Friday. Thanks a lot for watching from all of us in Washington. Have a good night.
Welcome to English in a Minute. Some American English expressions sound like they could hurt.
Hit the spot.
Let's see if Anna and Jonathan can help us out.
Have you been to the new restaurant down the street?
I haven't. Is the food any good?
It's delicious. I ate lunch there yesterday, and I had a hamburger that really hit the spot.